It's the 24th of July 2022. Players and fans have gathered in the Forum Copenhagen for the grand final of Masters Copenhagen, one of Valorant's major offline tournaments. The teams facing off are PaperX and FunPlus Phoenix. There's a live audience of around 5,000 spectators inside the arena, and upwards of 750,000 viewers tuning in from across the globe. The teams are battling for a coveted Masters trophy, and of course, the title of best team in the world. This match is the final, so a best of 5. The first team to 3 maps wins the series and the tournament.
Let's get into it. Copenhagen is looking beautiful today. The crowd is flooding in, and Josh, today history will be made. They need to be finding these kills, but it's FPX.
These players are just too sharp right now.
FPX completely dominate the first, but PaperX bounce back to tie up the scoreline.
3 kills in the round.
He's still going.
Oh, this guy wants to claim the ace. Right into it, man.
They then trade each other's map picks, bringing it to 2-all.
I know we're very close, and probably you guys thinking of winning and stuff, right? Just get out your head, okay,
drop that fucking shit. Just reset, okay?
The next map is the most important map of Valorant these 10 players will likely ever play. Everything comes down to Breeze. Breeze is an extremely predictable map in terms of agent comps and strategies. A conventional team consists of Viper, Sova, Jet, Skye, and Chamber or Cypher. But PaperX is no conventional team.
Regardless of what happens, just have fun, okay, boys? Yeah. We're going there full meme style, okay, boys? Yeah. Let's go out with a bang, okay? Yeah. We gotta pummel this fucking B bomb side. We're good, right? Yeah, we're ready to. Alright, for fun, okay, boys?
We are into the Prime Gaming Agent Select for the last time in this tournament. Keep your eyes peeled on whether we are going to get a Yoru. I'm quite vigilantly on Yoru watch right now, and things are already shaking up a little.
On the other side, Wildest goes
what?
back to a Jet. Jinggg is going to come in on the
I
deal
wanted
as
him
well.
to move, Bowler. You wanted him to move, but did you want him to move that far?
What is this comp?
Wait.
Not a single agent in this comp was played on Breeze at the top level. PaperX, with the pressure of an international grand final upon them, were just having fun. This moment represents everything about PaperX, but to understand what it truly means and the unique team behind it, we have to go back to the beginning. January 2020, an idea was thought up by ex-CS player DSN and the chief editor of CSGO2 Asia, Nick H. A fresh new org in Asian CSGO, with a modern outlook on esports, combining competitive teams, engaging content and stylish merch. From there, PaperX was born, and they signed a CSGO roster with a few familiar faces. Fast forward a few months to the release of Valorant. A tactical shooter made by Riot Games, it was going to be a major esport no matter what. PaperX jumped on the Valorant train almost immediately, signing a roster previously known as Vindicta in July of 2020. Unfortunately though, they didn't see much success, so heading into 2021 and the first season of the VCT, they dropped the team in search of a new approach. That search didn't take too long. The solution was fairly obvious.
I already kind of knew that everyone else didn't really want to play Counter-Strike anymore. So, like, out of the blue, one of us just brought up, hey, why don't we move to Valorant?
The main 5 were Benkai, Forsaken, Mindfreak, Defies, and Relentless, with Tommy as the 6th man and Alex as their coach. It was a mix of Indonesian, Singaporean, and Malaysian talent, who already had great chemistry from playing CSGO together for over 6 months. What they didn't have though was much time. The first VCT tournament was only a month after their last CS match, so they practiced non-stop to try and conquer Southeast Asia in this new battlefield. Over the next few months, PaperX gradually improved, turning losses into wins against Malaysia and Singapore's best. Early on, their demons were a team called Reality Rift. They couldn't seem to beat their star player Jinggg, but more on him later. Eventually, they defeated Team SMG in the grand finals of Malaysia-Singapore Challengers 3, giving them a chance to fight it out against the other top teams from Southeast Asia.
Last player standing.
They did pretty well, getting only a few rounds away from the finals, but they just barely missed out on a spot at Masters Reykjavik. X10 went as the Southeast Asian team instead, and PaperX fell by the wayside. But they'd had a taste of that glory, and were not going to let it slip again. Tommy departed the team to make way for Sheba, a former PaperX player who made his return in preparation for Split 2. A fairly dominant showing from them in Malaysia-Singapore took them back into the Southeast Asia playoffs, this time for a spot at Masters Berlin. They went unbeaten in every match until the grand final, by which point they'd already qualified. Finally a spot in an international event for PaperX. Their fellow representatives were supposed to be Valorant Esports with their Filipino roster, but COVID complications meant they couldn't secure visas for the tournament. Paper X would be the sole representative for Southeast Asia. They didn't want to let them down. But it wasn't as easy as that. They were on the world stage now, playing against the best teams not just in Asia, but in the world. Well, actually their first game was against the best team from Asia, the Korean powerhouse Vision Strikers. It's a team Paper X knew very well as scrim partners.
When we went into our groups, we just saw that we are playing against Vision Strikers, which we play a lot in scrims, and they always win us really badly, 24-0.
It was a massive test for their first game. The pressure was on. But not for Benkai. You see, Benkai is an entertainer at heart, and this tournament was the first where he showcased his amazing sense of humour. It started his now infamous walkouts, like this one with the crazy jumping and double shirt versus Vision Strikers, and then the bathrobe and teeth brushing walkout versus SMB.
What? Is he brushing his teeth?
Even in press conferences, he was a notorious joker.
How does that affect your mentality and pressure you might be feeling coming into the event?
Wait. 会讲中文吗？我不 No, I'm just kidding. I can speak English. Okay, so
Benkai provided humour for the team, which made them interesting, compared to the usual serious players giving standard answers. As the IGL, these jokes gave boundless confidence to the rest of the team, showing that even under intense pressure, there's always fun to be had. Unfortunately though, the comedy from Benkai wasn't able to push them over the line against Vision Strikers. Their next game against SMB was close too, and they won the first map in OT, but couldn't take it home, and exited Masters Berlin in the group stage. The tactical level of the team wasn't quite on par with the rest of the field, although it was clear they were incredibly skilled and had potential going forward. Back in APAC for the last chance qualifier, and Paper X had to say goodbye to one of their players. As all male Singaporeans do, Shiba had to undertake mandatory military service, which left him unavailable to play. They needed a replacement, and one name from their early days came to mind. Jinggg was signed to Paper X in September of 2021 as a secondary duelist to Forsaken. He was known for his flashy playstyle and incredible aim, so a perfect fit for this aggressive Paper X team. Results didn't improve instantly though, with the team going 1-2 in the Pacific LCQ and missing out on Champions 2021. They had no choice but to keep grinding into next year, the year that would define Paper X Valorant. They came into that first season of 2022 hungry, and showed it by completely dominating APAC and qualifying to Masters Reykjavik, only dropping one map in the process. Over the course of these games, Paper X showed a huge amount of unique set plays and agent comps that harnessed their aggressive style. They were starting to build a team identity. Using Yoru on Bind, putting Jinggg on Reyna, these caught attention from the wider Valorant community.
I think Paper X have got some serious upset potential because they play weird comps, but they don't just pick the comp and then wing it. They actually have some cool ideas.
In the final match, they clinched first seed with a close 3-2 win over Xerxia in the grand finals, which secured direct qualification into the playoffs at Masters Reykjavik. In other words, a guaranteed top 8 finish. This was Paper X's biggest chance to prove that minor regions in Valorant could truly make an impact on the global stage. They were in great form, with a unique style. If there was a time, it was now. Their first opponent was a familiar one, the same team they'd played in their first match in Berlin, now under new management. Vision Strikers had become DRX. A rivalry was starting to form between the two, not just in gameplay, but also in game philosophy. Paper X had always been about enjoying the game as much as possible, and sometimes that meant peaking just a little bit more than you had to. For DRX, Valorant was all about discipline, not making any missteps, and executing game plans to a T. This clash was highlighted perfectly on the first map of the series. On one side, an aggressive comp featuring double duelists, and on the other, a utility-heavy lineup with Stax' signature breach. How would it play out?
Mako inside the ultimate, and look who's right behind them. Only the one to be found
Oh,
for Forsaken, but Jingg's here. A double, the dismissed
Oh my God!
That's another foul.
Wow!
And Jinggg.
Because it's like their rotation through as well. Stax safe spot to utilize the Seekers, trying to ruin the day on Stax, but he will land the headshot in the end.
Paper X again lost narrowly to DRX, sending them down to the lower bracket. This time, it was different though. They were not going out straight away. Their first victims, a nervy guard team who couldn't deal with the confidence Paper X had over them. Next, they took down G2, the best EU team in the competition. These games were filled with inventive set plays and calculated over-aggression that led them to capitalise on the nerves of both teams. They weren't able to stop a red-hot Zeta division, but with those 2 wins, they'd reached 4th at an international tournament, putting them and their region on the map. This tournament truly showed off their W gaming playstyle, and they were incredibly entertaining to watch. Clearly high-skilled individuals playing unusual agents like Reyna and Yoru, along with fast-paced gameplay that launched their Valorant team into global interest. Viewers from everywhere had become endeared by the uniqueness and humour of the team, growing PaperX's fan base by a huge amount. And the best thing about it all, they'd had fun doing it. And the player on PaperX who always looked to be having the most fun was Forsaken.
Guys, they're so quiet, eh? What is this game, eh? Why are they so quiet, man? They're always quiet. Oh, always quiet. Guys, listen to me.
Forsaken had always been PaperX's main duelist. Flashy, aggressive, a little too aggressive sometimes, everything a duelist player should be. But in Masters Reykjavik, he stepped up massively. In the 2 games PaperX won, his average combat score was over 300. Against G2 especially, he went crazy. 29 kills on Yoru in that second map. He was proving himself not to just be a Jet 1 trick, and not just an onliner. He had what it took to be a top duelist in the world on LAN. But could he bring his team up there with him? PRX had a fairly comfortable qualification to Masters Copenhagen. Many people in the community thought their run at Reykjavik was a fluke. It was time to prove everyone wrong once again. Their first match was against a guild team who had just defeated the reigning champions of Optic in the group stage. W gaming was in full effect, however, and in a similar vibe to the G2 matchup at Reykjavik, PaperX took them down 2-0.
Responding, the crossfire there. Oh, no! You've got to be kidding me!
Oh, you can't be doing that, Jinggg!
For PaperX, the upper semis awaited them, against a Fnatic team who hadn't lost a match in 2 months. But PaperX were the team whose aggression consistently cut down overconfidence, and against the Fnatic team who had somewhat of a reputation for choking, it worked perfectly.
Within heaven, and that is a disaster for the old unit. How has he gotten 2?
This clutch from Mindfreak was a pivotal moment in PaperX's evolution as a team. Mindfreak had been seen as a fairly nervy controller player compared to the rest of the competition, but as he got more experience against top teams, he began to prove crucial to PaperX's strategy. When W gaming didn't work out and a round looked lost, Mindfreak would somehow manage to make it happen. His clutch factor went up exponentially at Copenhagen, proven by this very clip.
Just a one-man standing, pinged up by the Haunt, looking for the final player, and somehow...
He would need every clutch to go their way in the next match though, against the reigning champions, Optic. Optic had just beaten PaperX's Demons of DRX in the previous match in a battle for the ages. El Diablo was on fire, Chamber was the meta, all was set for Optic to take another title. Well, until PaperX absolutely destroyed them.
What can Mar find with the shorty? He's gonna 1v5 this thing. What do you think? No, Forsaken gets the ace!
Our first ever global crowd ace! And the paper people are loving it!
They even stole Optic's Neon Comp on Fracture, added another duelist to it, and 13-5'd them with it. PRX were clearly on fire, and with that win, they'd made it to the grand final. A guaranteed second place finish for an Asian team, the highest ever. They wouldn't know their opponent until the completion of the lower final, the Optic they'd just beaten versus an FPX team on the lower bracket run of their lives. Optic didn't have the power in Denmark to stop that momentum, and so FPX took the series pretty convincingly. Which brings us to the match at the start of this video. PaperX versus FPX, the Masters Copenhagen Grand Finals. Not only was this a clash of minor region versus major region, but also a complete clash of playstyles. As much as PaperX were known for their aggression, FPX were known for the opposite. They played a slow, defaulty game that countered PaperX's style perfectly on paper. It was a game of complete opposites, but usually, those are the closest.
The shot's not found though, and FPX, pure domination in map number 1.
He's just walking backwards though! Into the sideline of Defies! And that puts PaperX back level in the series.
But Sagetsu shuts it down, still Jinggg the satchel play, Sagetsu!
It's all down to Angel and he can't handle it. PaperX are taking us to a 5th.
And after 4 maps, that fated agent select finally happened. In that moment, the joyous whimsy of PaperX was immortalized in Valorant forever. They didn't end up winning the map or the tournament, and the Sagetsu 4K to close it out for FPX is a legendary Valorant clip. But it didn't matter. They'd done what they set out to do.
I think it's fine to just let my emotions come through a bit. You know, like I can't always be like joyous, you know, after all I did lose in a pretty heartbreaking way. I do feel like a sense of accomplishment because I'm definitely just proud of my team, and we never once like lost sight of the mentality that we should have brought, which is just to have fun.
But PaperX's story does not end there. Even though they lost the final, PaperX were on top of the Valorant world after Masters Copenhagen. It truly felt like they could win any game, especially with a player like Jinggg. You know what? I'll just let Sideshow explain.
Even when his team is losing, he destroys because he can make stuff work that no one else can. When he takes bad fights, they look like good fights because he's so skilled. He hasn't met an opposition that can shut him down. He just looks like he's better than even the people who are the best in the game.
And so coming into Champions 2022, things were looking great for PaperX. Their last two international finishes were 4th and 2nd, so Logic said they had a good shot at taking the crown if they kept improving. Only problem, they didn't qualify directly into the playoffs this time. A tough group stage stood in their way, and despite beating Edward Gaming in their first match, Red Hot Leviathan and Liquid squads managed to take them down, eliminating them at 13th. Things didn't look the same as they did at Copenhagen. Their aggression was becoming predictable. They were being punished for plays that they might have gotten away with earlier in the year. After being eliminated, PaperX could only wait to see what the future held, as Valorant headed into the era of franchising. As an org, PaperX weren't exactly an obvious choice for franchising. Sure, their Valorant team had made its mark, but a lot of what Riot were judging teams on was outside of the game. PaperX as an org had only existed since 2020, and that's why many expected them to not make it. But it seemed Riot valued what PaperX had done for Valorant already very heavily, and that meant they got a slot in VCT Pacific, one of the 10 teams forever a part of Valorant's Asian League, a huge achievement for such a young org. Many of the teams invited were reinventing their roster going into 2023, but the classic PaperX squad had proven just how good they were already, so none of the starting 5 players were changed. The only new signing was of a 6th player, which was made mandatory for franchising teams. PaperX went with Cigarettes, a former pro in many games, but who in 2023 was mostly known for being a content creator. That makes sense, he's only a 6th man. He won't need to play anyway, right? VCT Lock, the first tournament of Valorant franchising, with every single Tier 1 team in attendance. But with 32 teams comes a brutal format, single elimination. Lose once and you're out. It created some super intense matches and incredible tournament runs, but PaperX wouldn't see either of those. Their first game was against a team built to win. Cloud9 had signed Ye and Zellsis during the off-season, and with a talented core of Zephyr, Leaf and Vanity, many called it a super team. Could PaperX take them down? No. They got demolished by C9. It felt similar to Champions 2022, where the signature aggression was unorganized and consistently shut down. Obviously not much could be taken from only a single game, but once again PaperX had gone home much earlier than many expected.
PaperX, I still don't know what to think about that team, man.
They're just full sent on their identity, and I think that's the right call, but it's not a long-term solution.
There was nothing to do but wait for the next competition, the start of the Pacific League. 8 weeks of regular season play, top 6 go to playoffs, and top 3 from there go to Masters Tokyo. PaperX came into this season as a higher rated team in Pacific, but that was more based on their past achievements as opposed to their current form. They had to prove that their signature style of play could still work. This was the last chance for this roster of 5. But something was coming. Quite literally, a player called Something was coming up and captivating the Valorant scene. Something was a Russian player in the Japanese Challenger League, on a team called Sengoku Gaming. They weren't the best team in the league, but Something was consistently dropping incredible performances on duel lists. And when you get 120 kills in a 4-map series, or 136 kills in a single match, you're sure to attract some eyes. Not just from fans, but from teams as well. And so when Sengoku were eliminated from the Japanese playoffs, PaperX took a gamble and signed Something to their roster. This was a statement signing. They already had 2 duelist players, so logic would say they didn't need another one, especially if they were going to lean away from the W gaming style that seemed to be losing its edge. That's the thing about PaperX though, that style is PaperX. Something was an exciting prospect for the team, but he wouldn't arrive in Korea until a few weeks after the beginning of the league. In that time, the original starting 5 of PaperX won against DFM, not exactly an incredible achievement, and lost a narrow series to Team Secret. They had a 1-1 record going into the T1 game, Something's international debut, and he did not disappoint.
We've got them coming out now. The push to B happens. Something lurking up above here. Knives drawn. Just on the other side is intro. It connects. A knife reset is in. He's on the hunt.
They were prepared for that too, and he still gets out alive.
Oh my god. No, don't worry, he's already dead.
Nobody gets the kill off of the blind. What is going on?
I can't follow this.
Of course, you can only have 5 players on a team, so to put something in, Benkai was the one who stepped out longer term. An interesting decision considering he was their IGL, but with PaperX's chaotic playstyle, the team could still function without a traditional in-game leader. This swap meant some roles had to be shifted too. Forsaken made way for something in the duelist position, and he moved over to Flex. Could he tone down his aggression and shift how he played the game? Would this roster even work at all, or did they actually have to surrender their signature system? 4 wins and a qualification to playoffs later, the answer was no. The PaperX style wasn't lent away from, but even more heavily into. Interesting set plays, unusual agent comps, everything that they're known for. Something played Reyna on certain maps too, and even though she's not that viable in pro play, he made her work with his incredible individual skill. And their 7-2 record at the end of the season secured them 2nd seed into the playoffs, which meant they only needed to win 1 game to make it to Masters Tokyo. That game would be against T1, a strong Korean team who were improving day by day. But PaperX weren't phased.
Expected, just looking to overwhelm it. But something goes up and hits Saya player in the head.
Yeah, Saya looking for the pretty aggressive angle all the way up in the box.
What?
And something will not be stopped with the 3K.
Here comes the showstopper.
Yeah, he's got his own. He's looking. There's 2 angles.
No!
And he misses, and Forsaken takes 2 more. It's all up to Carpe.
Up in the air!
And the BM at the end as well. 13-10. And PaperX are your 2nd team that will be going to Masters Tokyo.
PaperX had done all they needed to in the Pacific League, but they hadn't done all they wanted to. DRX still stood in their way. The team PaperX had never beaten. A complete clash of game philosophies that DRX had ruled over. That was until this game.
They're gonna try to. Something wants that all. A great flash.
Yeah,
but he somehow still gets all of them.
Yeah, the spray too good.
Oh my god, he's still dismissing.
He's just dancing around him. He doesn't even try to pull his gun out. He's like, yeah, I'll just let Forsaken get the job done. I don't care. Here's something
Look
now.
out here.
Tries to take that shot through the wall. Not going to happen, but Forsaken is on the site, and he lines up 3 in a row, picks up the 4K, and PaperX are 1 round away from 2-0ing DRX.
13-5, 13-6 in favor of PaperX. They completely demolished them. They had finally overcome their demons, and not by matching them at their own style, but by fully committing to the way they enjoyed playing the game. And that continued through into the grand finals, a rematch against DRX. DRX came in hot, winning the first 2 maps. But the team spirit from PaperX shined back through again to reverse sweep and take the Pacific League title, their first trophy in Valorant, overcoming all of Asia to represent APAC at Masters Tokyo. But something wasn't coming. Because Something was a Russian player and signed fairly late on for PaperX, they struggled to get him a visa to go to Japan. Without one, he couldn't even get into the country, let alone compete at Masters Tokyo. They'd lost their superstar, but Benkai was still available to sub in, and they'd proven they could be a top team with him. Except, Benkai was no longer their sub. They'd announced that Benkai would be benched entirely, and CGRS would become their full-time 6th man. That meant CGRS would be on the starting roster for Masters Tokyo, a content creator who pretty much only played Gecko, with his first match for the team being a rematch against DRX in the playoffs of an international tournament. Insane. And because of that, PaperX naturally weren't expected to do much at Tokyo at all.
Wait, I'm not down. No. PaperX would not be better than T1 without Something.
But this was still that same core who got 2nd at Copenhagen, and they wouldn't go down easy. DRX hadn't looked stellar in the group stage and were still messing around with their 6-person roster, but obviously had quality in spades.
Still Buzz. Holding down the one extremity. Here into elbow. It needs to be that random kill, and the random spray, the last bullet, finds it, isolates it, knows where Buzz is, and he wins it!
Despite a shaky performance from CGRS, the team pulled together and won a solid series over their rivals for the 3rd consecutive match in a row. The first hurdle had been conquered. The second one, however, was a bit higher. The reigning champions of Fnatic stood in their way, and sometimes it doesn't matter how much momentum a team has. You're playing against Fnatic. It really wasn't pretty for PaperX, and they got sent down into the lower bracket. A reality check.
Nothing to stop him so far. They gotta go walkabouts. Leo's gonna find it as his alpha. Well.
Blink and you miss it. 12-0.
This game might be over before it even begun. 12-0. We do not see that often at this level.
They were still playing with a Gecko main content creator, and just weren't at the level of the top teams without Something. Or so everyone said. PaperX went into the next game with a momentum disadvantage. Edward Gaming were on an incredible run, from getting their first win at an international event to just beating Loud in dominant fashion to send them home. Fans from all across the world watched to see their inventive, aggressive playstyle and a unique look on the game. Sound familiar? Either way, EDG and Kang came in swinging to this game. An almost immediate 11-4 lead on Fracture seemed to be the start of PaperX's elimination. Full buy versus half buy. This should be a trivial match point for Edward.
And yeah, just anticipating it. The fast play towards it, already onto the side. There's a satchel play over the top here. Dash from Kang. No one clearing that corner. Skips and hops though, breaks across their placement just enough for these kills and still anchoring towards the right. That's the buy out the smoke. They thought the molly was safe. Okay, PaperX. Pulling around like that one out of seemingly nowhere.
But they weren't giving up the throne of Asia that easily. Round after round, PaperX came out with heroic plays that matched EDG's, reminding the world and themselves that they're never to be counted out. 14-12 to PaperX, from 11-4 down. CGRS became somewhat of an emotional leader during this game, hyping up the team after every one round. But the series wasn't over yet. EDG took the second map of Split, but couldn't complete the sweep as Jinggg completely shut them down on Lotus. His Raze play during Masters Tokyo was absolutely incredible, and he single-handedly won maps to keep them there. PaperX stayed alive thanks to his heroics, while Edward headed home proud of their run. Top 4, much higher than people thought they could ever go with CGRS, but they'd still only beaten Asian teams. Their only truly international test didn't exactly go to plan, so the expectation was similar heading into their next game. Up against the highly experienced NRG squad, FNS was known to undo teams with his IGLing, and to never lose rematches. This wasn't an exact rematch, but the last two times these cores played, PaperX took it over Optic, and they'd never truly been forgiven. Everything was stacked against them. Rounds went back and forth on Pearl until eventually it reached overtime. Then 13-13, a crucial round.
The swing in, he's playing it out patiently, there's one, there's two, Jinggg in the meantime finds one on the opposite side, but Sam comes up with eliminations, the spike, grabbed, Mindfree, can he exit fast enough? The answer is going to be no! The reckoning at the ready. Instantly invested. A 1v1 to see who can take this now to map point. CGRS. The stand-in. He knows he needs to rush this down. He needs to play for the kill. There's not enough time to go for the plan. He's swinging around the corner, and he manages to get it done! Some with a shorty doesn't find him! PaperX, they take it to 14!
You gotta be kidding me! The sub for PaperX at the last second again!
A miracle clutch from CGRS.
Doing what Sam is doing on the complete opposite side, both teams having the exact same reaction there.
And I don't blame you. It felt like it was in hand.
Just avoiding the bullets of the shorty gifted PaperX the win on map 1. Lotus was NRG's, but incredible plays from Forsaken's Harbor on Bind was enough to pull them through, in the closest series they'd played yet.
There's two more left to go. He's playing anti-flash, and now it's on Finesse. The IGL, the captain, to try to take us in OT, but defies says no! You shall not pass this point! PaperX do the impossible! They eliminate NRG, a team that has not been outside of the top 3 at a Masters or Champions event since 2021. They stopped them dead in their tracks with 10 days of preparation and a substitute player.
Top 3 of Masters Tokyo with a sub, a content creator turned 6th man, who had become a hero for his team in the highest pressure moments. Evil Geniuses and Fnatic were the only two teams that stood between PaperX and the title. Unfortunately, those two teams were just on another level at Tokyo, and against EG in the lower final, PaperX fell just short. It was an incredible run for a team that has had a tumultuous year, and they'll look to continue it at Champions in LA. Maybe they'll be the ones to stop Fnatic from creating a dynasty. PaperX's story will keep being written for years to come, with more highs and more lows, but the core of it will always stay the same. They just have fun. They'll play crazy agent comps, they'll do cool strats, because that's the way they love to play. Like Forsaken says,
kalau misalnya kalian main gak enjoy, percuma kalian main karena
I've been Commend, subscribe if you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.